It was a hot summer afternoon. The sun was strong, and the roads were dusty. Inside a small grocery store at the corner of a quiet street, people stood in line, tired and sweating. Among them was a young woman named Farah. She looked nervous. Her dupatta was slipping from her head, and her baby, just a few months old, cried in her arms. Her clothes were simple and old. Her sandals looked like they had walked through too many hard days. Farah stood in line with a small basket. Inside the basket were only basic items. Half a packet of milk, a few pieces of bread, some rice, a small pack of baby wipes, that's all. Nothing extra, nothing fancy. She looked at the baby, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Just a little more, my love. We're almost done." At the checkout, when her turn came, the cashier looked at her and started scanning the items. Baby cried louder. Farah rocked him gently. Her face was pale. Her eyes had dark circles. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly for weeks. The cashier read the total, 970 rupees. Farah opened her small cloth purse. She counted quickly. She had only 720 rupees. Her hands trembled. She looked around, embarrassed. People behind her were already getting impatient. "Madame, please move faster," a man behind her said. "We don't have all day." The cashier stared at her. Farah swallowed hard and spoke in a low voice. "Please, remove the baby wipes." The cashier removed it. Still, the total was 840. She removed the rice. Now the total was 740. Still short. She looked at her baby, his eyes teary, his lips dry. The moment of defeat, Farah whispered to the cashier, "Just give me the bread and milk, please." Her voice broke while speaking. The cashier sighed and started canceling the other items. People behind her shook their heads. One woman whispered to her friend, "Why do these people come if they can't pay?" Farah heard it. Her face turned red, not from anger, but shame. Her baby started crying again, louder this time. And at that moment, Farah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hopelessness. The man in Lenya man behind her stepped forward. He was wearing a simple white shirt, jeans, and worn-out sneakers. His name was Zesian. He looked like a college student, or maybe a part-time worker. He had been watching quietly. He saw Farah's struggle, the baby, the tears, the shame. Without saying a word, he pulled out his wallet. He gave a 500 rupee note to the cashier. "Complete her bill," he said softly. Farah turned around quickly. "No, please, I can't accept." Zesian stopped her gently. "It's okay, I've been there," he said with a kind smile. Farah stared at him for a second. Tears filled her eyes. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered, but she didn't even ask his name. She just picked up her bag, held her baby close, and walked out. Forgotten by one, remembered by another. Zesian didn't follow her. He didn't expect thanks or friendship. To him, it was just a small moment in life, a moment to do good. He paid for his own items and walked away. As he left the store, he didn't know that this one act, this small decision to help a stranger, would come back to him 20 years later in a way that would change everything. Time passes. Life moved on. Zesian finished university, got a job, moved cities, changed homes. He never saw that woman again. He didn't even remember her face clearly. That day at the grocery store faded from his memory, like many small good deeds do. But some moments, even if forgotten by one heart, live forever in another. The letter that arrived 20 years later. Zesian was now older. He had a small business. He lived in a quiet neighborhood. One evening, while sipping tea at his new home, his phone rang. It was his old neighbor from the previous colony. "Zesian, bye. A letter came for you at your old address. I think you should read it. Looks important." Zesian was surprised. A letter. In this age, he told the man to send it to his new home. The next day, the envelope arrived. It was plain. No name, no number, no stamp, just his name on the front. Zesian written in blue ink. Curious. He opened it. Inside was a single folded paper. He unfolded it slowly and read, "You may not remember me, but I remember you. 20 years ago, you paid for my groceries when I had nothing. That day, I was going to give up, but you gave me hope. Because of you, everything changed. I just wanted to say, thank you, Farah." Zesian stared at the letter. He read it again. And again. His hands trembled. His heart beat faster. Farah, grocer's baby. The memory came rushing back like a river. Who is she now? Zesian stood up, holding the letter. He looked at the envelope again. No return address, no contact, nothing. Why now? Where is she? What happened after that day? And most importantly, why did she write to him? After 20 years? Zesian sat on his bed, staring at the letter in his hand. The handwriting was neat, the words simple, but the meaning behind them was deep. He read the letter again and again. It wasn't just a thank you, it felt like a piece of someone's heart had been placed in his hands. The name at the bottom said Farah. He tried to remember. Slowly the memory returned. A crying baby, a woman with tired eyes, a grocery store on a hot afternoon. Her face was still unclear in his mind, but the emotion was strong. That day he had helped her with a few hundred rupees. He had walked away thinking it was nothing, but now, 2 decades later, she had written this. Why now? Where was she? Who had she become? And why had she found him after all this time, only to leave no contact details? Zesian turned the envelope over. No number, no return address, no clue. It had been delivered to his old house. Luckily, his former neighbor recognized his name and sent it to him. Otherwise, it might have been lost forever. He wondered how many times had Farah tried to find him. Why didn't she just call, or visit, or send an email? The questions grew like vines in his head. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about the possibilities. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she just wanted to close a chapter in her life. Or maybe something had happened. Something big. The next morning, he made a decision. He had to find her. Not just because of the letter, but because his heart now carried a weight that wouldn't leave until he got answers. He started with the easiest step. He opened his laptop and typed in her name, Farah. Thousands of results came up. He added more. Farah Groceries helped crying baby. Still nothing useful. He tried Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Many Farahs, no way to know which one was her. Then he remembered something. The old grocery store. It had been 20 years, but maybe it still existed. He got in his car and drove back to the old neighborhood. Everything had changed. New buildings, new shops. The road was wider. He parked and walked down the street. The store was still there, but now it had a new name. Modern Mart. He went inside. The layout was different, but some things felt the same. A young boy stood at the counter. Zessian asked him, "Was this always Modern Mart?" The boy shook his head. "No, sir. My father bought this shop 10 years ago. It used to be something else." Zessian nodded. "Do you have any old employees here? Anyone who worked before your father bought it?" The boy called his father. An older man came out. He had a kind face and soft voice. Zessian explained the story, careful with his words. The man listened quietly. Then he said, "There was one woman back then. She came often with a baby. She worked at a hospital nearby. Always looked tired, but I don't remember her name." Oh, small hope lit inside Zessian. A hospital? That was a clue. He asked, "Do you remember which hospital?" The man thought for a moment. "Yes, Al-Noor Medical. It's not far from here." Zessian thanked him and left immediately. At Al-Noor Medical, the receptionist looked confused when he asked about a worker named Farah from 20 years ago. "Sir, our records don't go that far back," she said. "But I can check with our senior nurse." An older nurse came out. Zessian explained everything. The woman listened carefully, then her eyes softened. "Farah," she whispered. "Yes, I remember her. She was quiet, strong. Her husband had died suddenly. She worked hard, raised her child alone, but she left years ago, after something terrible happened." Zessian's heart beat faster. "What happened?" he asked. The nurse hesitated, then said, "Her son had an accident. He survived, but she quit everything and moved away. No one knows where, but I heard. He became very smart, a kind boy. I think she put him in a good school after that." Zessian felt something change in him. Her son, that baby. What kind of man had he become? Did he even know about the day his mother was helped by a stranger? Zessian went home with more questions, then answers. He sat on his sofa, the letter still in his pocket. He stared at it again. The words echoed in his mind. "Because of you, everything changed." He wished she had written more, but maybe she had said everything she needed to say in just those few words. That night, he searched again. This time he didn't look for Farah, he looked for her son. If the nurse was right, maybe the boy had grown into someone important. He searched for Farah Son Award, Farah Single Mother, and then finally typed, "Boy raised by single mother wins award, Pakistan." One article stood out. He clicked. It was a news piece about a young man named Haris Faraz, who had recently won an international award for building schools in rural areas. The article said he was raised by a single mother. It mentioned that his mother had faced many struggles but always taught him the value of kindness. And then one line stopped Zessian's breath. "My mother always said a stranger once saved us with a bag of groceries. That's why I build schools, because small acts can change lives." The next morning, Zessian woke up with a purpose. The face of the young man from the article Haris Faraz was now clear in his mind. Zessian printed the article and placed it in his drawer, then sat down with a notebook and began writing down everything he knew. Farah was his mother. She once worked at Al-Noor Hospital. Her son Haris now ran an organization that built schools in poor areas. That was enough to begin. Zessian opened his laptop and searched for Haris Faraz's foundation. It wasn't hard to find. A website popped up with photos of school children, teachers, and buildings under construction. In the center was a photo of Haris, smiling with a group of kids around him. The headline read, "Founder and Director Haris Faraz, Building Futures with Heart." Zessian clicked the contact page. There was a general email and an office address. He typed a message, simple and honest. "Dear Haris, I recently came across your story and was deeply touched. I believe I may have once crossed paths with your mother many years ago. If possible, I would like to speak with her. I have something important to share." He hit send, then waited. The next day there was no reply, nor the day after. A week passed. Still silence. Zessian began to wonder if the email even reached anyone, or maybe they thought he was just another fan. Ready to give up, Zessian printed the address listed on the website and decided to visit. The office was in another city, 3 hours away. He took the early bus, carrying the letter Farah had written, the article, and a deep hope in his heart. The foundation's office was in a quiet area, a neat building surrounded by trees and children's drawings on the outer walls. A kind receptionist welcomed him. Zayshin asked if he could speak to Harris. She hesitated. Sir, he's very busy today. Do you have an appointment? Zayshin shook his head. No, but I came from far. Please just give him this envelope. She agreed, took the envelope with Farah's letter inside, and promised to deliver it. Zayshin returned home, unsure if he would ever hear back. Another week passed. Then one evening, while he was watering the plants in his small balcony, his phone rang. A number flashed on the screen. Unknown. He picked it up. Hello. A calm young voice replied. Is this Mr. Zessian? Yes. This is Haris Faraz. I received your letter. Zayshin felt his breath pause. Haris continued. My mother cried when she saw your name. She told me about you. About that day at the grocery store. She never forgot, sir. She's been trying to find you for years. Zessian sat down slowly on the chair beside him. She found me first. She sent me a letter. Yes, Haris said. She never knew where to send it until recently. She found your name in an old hospital logbook. That's how she tracked your old house. She didn't expect a reply. But sir, she wants to meet you. We both do. Can you come to our home tomorrow? Zayshan nodded, his throat tight. Yes, I'll be there. The next day he wore a clean shirt and simple shoes and traveled again. This time not for answers, but for something he didn't even know he needed. Closure. The house was small but beautiful. Flowers lined the windows. As Zayshin stepped through the gate, the door opened. Farah stood there. Her hair had grayed, her face lined with age, but her eyes were the same. The same eyes filled with pain, strength, and hope. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she took one step forward and said softly, You remembered me. Zayshin's voice cracked. It took me time. I'm sorry. Farah held his hand gently. You have nothing to be sorry for. You saved me that day. I just never got to thank you properly. They sat together in the living room. Haris brought tea and quietly stepped away to give them space. Farah told Zayshin how that day changed her life. She was about to return everything, walk away, and give up on herself. She had no money, no job, but his small act gave her courage. That same day, she went to the hospital and begged for work. They gave her a chance. Slowly, she built a life. Haris grew up watching her work day and night. She told him again and again, one kind man helped us. That's why we must help others. Zayshin listened, tears in his eyes. He never knew. He had walked away thinking it was just a moment. But to Farah, it was the start of a new life. She showed him a wooden box. Inside were old photos, Haris's school reports, and at the very bottom, a faded receipt from the grocery store. Farah smiled. I kept this. I don't know why, but it reminded me that angels don't have wings. Sometimes, they just stand behind you in line. Zayshan laughed softly, wiping his eyes. I wasn't an angel. I was just a man with a few extra rupees and a big heart, she replied. Later, Haris joined them again. He shared how his foundation was inspired by his mother's strength and the story of that day. We've built 10 schools so far. Each one started with one small act of kindness. Zayshin felt pride he couldn't explain. He looked at Haris, now a strong, confident young man, and then at Farah, once a stranger, now like family. He realized that sometimes, one small act can echo across decades, change lives, and return when you least expect it. That night, as he left their home, Farah hugged him and said, You were the start of our story, and now, you're part of it forever. As Zayshin walked away, the stars above seemed brighter. His steps were light, his heart full. The letter he had once opened with confusion had now given him peace. And though 20 years had passed, it felt like life had just brought him back to the moment where everything truly began. Zayshin returned home that night with a heart that felt both heavy and light. He had gone in search of a stranger, only to be embraced like family. Faraz's story lived in his mind. The struggle, the pain, the strength, and Haris, her son, was a living result of that silent act of kindness made years ago in a grocery store line. Zayshin couldn't stop thinking about how easily that moment could have been forgotten, but Farah never forgot. Haris never forgot. And now, neither would he. The next few days passed in reflection. Zayshin sat quietly in the evenings, sipping tea, staring at the letter that had changed his life. He had tucked it into a small photo frame and placed it on his table. Whenever he looked at it, it reminded him that life had strange ways of rewarding kindness. One morning, Haris called. His voice was excited. Uncle Zayshan, would you come with us next week? We're opening a new school in a village near It's a big event. Mama wants you there, Zayshan smiled. Of course I'd be honored. Haris paused, then said, There's something special we want to show you too. The ride to Chakwal was long but peaceful. Farah, Haris, and Zayshan sat together in the car, sharing stories, laughter, and memories. Farah told Zayshan about the years she had worked double shifts at the hospital just to afford school fees. I used to pack Haris's lunch at 4 a.m., work 2 jobs, and return home to cook dinner. But I always told myself we're still standing because someone once helped us stand. Haris listened quietly, He had heard the story many times, but today, hearing it with Zishan beside him, it felt more real. When they arrived at the village, a crowd was waiting. Children stood in neat lines, holding flowers and small flags. Villagers gathered under a decorated tent. The school was a small but beautiful building painted in bright colors with smiling cartoons on the walls. Zacian looked around and felt something stir inside him. This wasn't just a building. It was hope in bricks and paint. The ceremony began. Harris gave a speech, thanking the donors, the volunteers, and the teachers. Then he looked at Zishan and said, "Today's school is special. It carries a name that means everything to me." He turned and pulled a curtain from a board on the wall. It revealed the name Zishan Welfare School, for the man who changed our world. Zishan stood frozen. People clapped. Children cheered. Farah gently touched his arm. "You deserve this," she whispered. Zishan blinked back tears. He walked to the board, touched his name on it, and whispered, "I did nothing big." Hari stood beside him and said, "But to us, it was everything." The rest of the event passed in joy and celebration. Zishan talked to children, handed out books, and watched the smiles spread. Every corner of the school felt alive. Every classroom whispered stories waiting to be written. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Zishan sat on a bench outside the school. Haris joined him. "Uncle," he said, "can I ask you something?" Zishan nodded. "That day, in the store, why did you help us?" Zishan smiled. "Because I saw someone in pain, and I had enough in my pocket to ease it, that's all." Haris nodded slowly. "I think about it a lot. If you hadn't helped us, maybe I would have grown up hungry, uneducated, maybe even angry, but instead, I got love, lessons, and a path. All because you chose to care." Zishan put a hand on Harris's shoulder. "Your mother is the true hero. She turned that small moment into a life of meaning." Haris looked at the children playing nearby. "I just want to keep the chain going. Uncle, help someone else, so they can help another, like a ripple in water." Zishan stared at the sky turning orange and said, "That's how the world heals. Haris, one ripple at a time." As night fell, they drove back to the city. Zishan was quiet, watching the dark road ahead. He thought about the people who walk through life unseen, carrying burdens, praying for kindness. He thought about how a few rupees, a gentle word, or even a kind smile could change someone's entire world. Back home, Zishan looked at the framed letter again. He now understood its full weight. It wasn't just a thank you. It was proof that the world still had goodness. The days after the news interview brought many changes. People started recognizing Zishan on the street. Shopkeepers greeted him with smiles, children waved at him, and some even asked to take pictures. At first he felt shy. He was not used to this attention. He had lived a quiet life, never thinking that one small action years ago would turn him into a symbol of kindness. Farah and Harris remained close. They called regularly, invited him to events, and made sure he was part of their journey. Zishan, though simple in nature, felt a strange joy growing in his heart. He had lived many years feeling unnoticed, almost forgotten, but now, he was part of something bigger than himself. One afternoon, as he sat in his living room reading a newspaper, the doorbell rang. He opened the door and found a well-dressed man holding a small box. "Delivery for Mr. Zishan," the man said politely. Zishan took the box, confused. He hadn't ordered anything. He opened it slowly and found a beautiful wooden plaque inside. Carved into it were the words, "To the man who changed the direction of our lives. With love and respect, Farah and Haris." He smiled softly and placed the plaque beside the framed letter. These were not awards, not riches, but they were treasures. Proof that he had made a difference. Later that week Haris came to visit. They sat in the garden, enjoying the evening breeze. Haris looked thoughtful. "Uncle," he said, "we've started a new project. We're planning to build a large learning center in the city. A place where children from poor families can study, use computers, learn skills." Zishan nodded. "That sounds amazing." Harris continued, "We want to name it after people who inspired the mission. You and my mother. It will be called the Zishan Learning Center." As Zishan was stunned, he looked at Haris with disbelief. "No, Haris, I don't deserve that. I only helped once." Haris smiled. "Once is all it takes. That help created a new path. You didn't just give money, you gave hope. And now hundreds of children will walk the path you helped create." Zishan looked away for a moment, his eyes moist. "I never thought a few rupees could do this much." Haris replied, "Kindness multiplies, uncle. It never ends where it starts." As the days passed, Zishan visited more of Haris's schools. He talked to children, heard their dreams, and shared his own story. His presence alone inspired students. He told them how one act, even a small one, could create a wave of change. The children listened with wide eyes and open hearts. One little girl came up to him after a talk and asked, "Uncle, do you think I can help someone too, even though I'm poor?" Zishan knelt beside her and said, "Beta, being poor doesn't stop you from being kind. A kind word, a shared pencil, even a smile can help someone. And sometimes, that's enough to save a life." The girl smiled, and Zishan knew he had planted another seed of kindness. Meanwhile, the foundation started getting international attention. Articles were written, TV channels requested interviews. But through it all, Zishan stayed humble. He always reminded everyone, I'm not the hero. Farah is the hero. Haris is the hero. I was just a man in line who decided not to look away. One morning, Farah invited Zishan for breakfast. They sat on the rooftop, enjoying parathas and tea. She looked at him with gentle eyes. Do you know Zishan Bai? There was a time I thought I'd never smile again. I was scared, tired, and completely alone. I had nothing left but that crying baby and a broken heart. Zayshan listened quietly. Farah continued, but then you stepped forward, and suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. That small moment became the fire that kept me going. You didn't just pay for groceries, you reminded me I was still seen. Zayshan touched her hand. You were always strong, Farah. You just needed someone to remind you of it. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun rise over the city. The world still had problems, poverty, cruelty, injustice, but in that moment, the air felt pure, hopeful. They didn't need to speak. Their hearts understood everything. A few days later, the foundation held a celebration. It was the 10th school opening. Donors, teachers, children, and volunteers gathered under a large tent. Zayshan was asked to speak. He walked slowly to the stage, looked at the crowd, then began in his usual quiet tone. I'm not a speaker. I'm just a man who is in the right place at the right time. I didn't do anything great. I didn't build these schools. I didn't raise this amazing boy. I didn't fight poverty. But I did one thing. I chose to help when I could. That's all. And maybe that's what we all need to do. Help when we can, wherever we can. The crowd clapped, some wiped away tears. Zishan stepped down and sat beside Farah, who held his hand tightly. After the event, a journalist came to him and said, Sir, what would you like your legacy to be? Zishan thought for a moment, then replied, I don't need a legacy. I just want people to remember that a stranger once paid for groceries, and because of that, a child got an education, a woman found her strength, and many others found hope. That's enough for me. That night, Zayshan walked home alone. The street lights glowed softly. He looked up at the stars and smiled. Life had brought him full circle. From a quiet man in a grocery store to a man whose name was now attached to schools, stories, and a movement of kindness. And yet, inside, he still felt the same, still humble, still grateful, still amazed at how one small act could grow into something so big. He reached home, opened the door, and looked at the wall where the letter and plaque hung. He touched them gently and whispered, Thank you, Farah, for remembering me, for letting me be part of your journey, for showing me that small things truly matter. The night was silent, but his heart was alive, and somewhere far away, in another village, a child opened a book for the first time, walked into a classroom with his name on it, and took the first step on a path that had begun with a single moment of unexpected kindness. Weeks passed, and life settled into a calm routine once again. Zayshan still visited the schools from time to time, still received letters from children, and still heard stories from Farah and Haris that made him smile. But there was something different now. He had become part of a bigger story, and the ripple of his one kind act continued to spread far beyond what he could see. One morning, Haris called with excitement in his voice. Uncle, there's someone I want you to meet. He's coming from another city today. He heard our story on television and insists on meeting the man behind it all. Zayshan laughed softly. Me? What would he want with me? Haris said. He's a businessman. He wants to support the foundation, and he says your story moved him deeply. Zayshan hesitated but agreed to come. Later that afternoon, Zayshan arrived at the foundation office. Inside, a man in his 40s stood waiting, wearing a crisp suit and holding a leather bag. He smiled warmly when he saw Zayshan. Sir, it is an honor to meet you. I'm Selman. I run a company that funds educational projects. But this is the first time I've felt truly inspired to do more after hearing what you did 20 years ago. Zayshan shook his hand modestly. I only paid for groceries, he said quietly. Salman smiled. And because of that, hundreds of children go to school today. You see a small act. I see the beginning of something powerful. They sat down, and over tea, Salman shared his own story. He had grown up in poverty too. There were nights when he had no dinner, no books, and no one to help. One day, a teacher gave him a free notebook and said, Don't waste this. Use it to change your future. He did. He studied hard, earned scholarships, and built a successful life. But he had always wanted to give back. Hearing about Zayshan reminded him of his past, and he wanted to be part of that same chain of kindness. Let's build 5 more schools, Salman said. I'll fund them all, but I want them to be special, not just buildings. Places where kindness is taught along with books. Zayshan was overwhelmed. He never imagined his name or story would inspire someone so deeply. The very next week, plans began. Land was surveyed, designs were made, and local teachers were hired. Zayshan visited each location, walking through the empty fields where classrooms would one day stand. At every site, he spoke to parents and children. His message was always the same: education was not just about success, but about giving others a hand when they fall. Farah often joined him. Together, they told their story, and people listened not with ears, but with hearts. Haris documented everything, taking photos and writing updates to share with donors. One evening, while sitting with Zishan, he said, "Uncle, do you know something? I used to be angry when I was young. Angry at life, at my father's death, at our poverty. But Mama would always calm me. And then she would tell me your story, that one kind man had saved us with a simple act. And I would think maybe the world isn't as cruel as it looks." Zayshan looked at Haris with quiet pride. "You turned that anger into light. Beta, that's what makes you special." Haris nodded. "But only because you showed us that light first." Construction of the new schools moved quickly. The communities helped, donating bricks, labor, and meals for workers. Everyone felt connected to the mission, and everywhere they went, Z's name was met with respect, not for wealth or power, but for the reminder that good still existed in this world. One of the villages they visited was particularly poor. Children there studied under a tree. They had no bags, no shoes, not even a blackboard. When Zayshan saw it, he didn't speak. He just stood still, heart aching. Later, he turned to Haris and said, This is where we build first." In less than 2 months, the school was ready. On opening day, Zishan stood before the children, holding a piece of chalk. He drew a heart on the new board and said, "This is the most important lesson. Be kind, always." The children clapped, and one small boy came forward, holding a flower. "Sir, I want to be like you," he said. Zishan bent down and smiled. "Then start by helping the boy next to you. That's how it begins." Back home, Farah received a letter addressed to all three of them. It was from a woman in another city, a widow struggling to raise 2 daughters. She had seen their interview and said it gave her courage to keep going. "Because of you," she wrote, "I believe again. I believe that someone will help, that my daughters will have a future." They read the letter aloud, and Farah's eyes filled with tears. "Just like I once believed because of you," she whispered to Zish. The impact continued to grow. More letters arrived, more schools were planned, more hearts were touched. Yet through it all, Zishan remained simple. He still lived in his old home, still ate humble meals, still walked to the corner tea shop every morning. But now, children greeted him as Zishan uncle, and people nodded with respect when he passed. One day Hari sat with him and asked, "Uncle, do you ever wonder why life brought us together again after so many years?" Zishan thought for a moment, then replied, "Because some stories are not finished until their purpose is complete. We had to meet again, so the story could continue through every child, every smile, every act of kindness that follows." Haris nodded. "Then let's never let it end." They shook hands, and in that moment, 2 generations, one who had given and one who had received, stood united in a bond stronger than time. And while the world outside remained busy and chaotic, in small corners of the country, in every classroom that bore their names, a quiet revolution of kindness continued to grow, started by one man who chose not to look away, and carried forward by those who chose to remember. Months passed, and the movement only grew stronger. What had started as one small act in a grocery store had become a wave of compassion sweeping through villages, towns, and even cities. Zayshan, who once lived a quiet, unnoticed life, was now a name children whispered with respect and curiosity. His days were filled with visits, events, and conversations with people whose lives were touched by the growing network of schools. Yet in his heart, he remained the same humble, kind, and still a little surprised that all of this had happened just because he decided to help a struggling mother one ordinary afternoon. One evening, Farah invited Zishan and Haris for dinner. The house smelled of warm spices and memories. As they ate together, laughter filled the room. It felt like a family that had been brought together not by blood, but by fate. After dinner, Farah brought out an old photo album. They looked through it together, smiling at the pictures of Haris growing up, his first school uniform, his first speech, his graduation day. Then Farah stopped at one picture. It was faded and worn, showing her and Haris outside a small rented room years ago. "This was taken the week after you helped us," she said softly. "I had just started working at the hospital again. We didn't have much, but we had hope." Zishan looked at the picture for a long time. "You gave your son a better life. I only lit the first candle. You kept it burning." Haris looked between the two of them, and now, together, we're lighting candles for others. A few days later, Zayshan was invited to speak at a university. It was a large event, filled with young students eager to hear stories of real change. When it was his turn to speak, Zayshan walked slowly to the stage, holding only a single object in his hand, the faded grocery receipt from that day long ago. He began, "I never planned to be here. I never wanted fame. I never even thought that helping someone with their shopping would mean anything. But that's the thing. You don't always know what your kindness will do. Sometimes, it creates ripples you'll never see. And sometimes, it comes back to you in ways you never imagined." He paused and looked around the hall. "If you remember one thing, let it be this: never walk past someone in need, thinking your help won't matter. It always matters. Even if no one sees it, even if it's just a small act, it matters." The students gave him a standing ovation. Some even cried. And after the event, many came forward, sharing their own small stories of kindness. Zishan listened to each one, encouraging them, reminding them that the world needed more people who cared quietly and acted gently. Back at the foundation office, Horace shared some exciting news. "Uncle, we've been offered an international partnership. An organization from Canada wants to work with us to build schools in remote areas." Zacian smiled, proud but calm. "That's wonderful, but promise me something. Never forget why this started. Not for fame, not for money, but to remind people that good still exists." Horace nodded. "Always, Uncle. That's the heart of everything we do." One day, while visiting one of the newest schools, Zacian met a young boy named Bill. The boy was shy, his shoes torn, his uniform too big, but he had bright eyes and a curious smile. Zacian sat beside him and asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Bill looked at him seriously. "A doctor, so I can help people like someone once helped my mother." Zacian raised an eyebrow. "Your mother?" Bill nodded. "Yes," she said. "A kind man gave her medicine once when I was sick. She never forgot. She says because of him, I got better. So I want to be like that." Zacian felt a lump in his throat again. Another small act, from someone, somewhere, had planted the seed of kindness. It made him wonder how many other unseen acts were out there, quietly shaping the world. Later that night, Zacian sat in his room thinking about Bill, about Farah, about Harris, and about the countless others touched by this growing wave. He took out his old notebook and began to write not speeches, not plans, just thoughts. He wrote about how helping someone didn't need grand words or wealth. It only needed the willingness to care. He wrote that sometimes, all a person needs is to be reminded that they matter. And he wrote that the world wasn't broken because people were bad, but because too many good people stayed silent when they could have spoken, walked away when they could have helped. In the morning, he received a letter from a girl named Sana. She was in high school and had watched his interview. Her father had passed away, and her mother worked 2 jobs. "Sometimes I want to give up," she wrote, "but then I remember your story, and I tell myself if someone like you could change so much with one small act, then maybe I can too." Zacian folded the letter with care and placed it next to the others. His small wooden drawer was now full of these letters from children, mothers, teachers, strangers, each one a reminder that kindness never ended where it started. As he walked to the tea shop that evening, the owner greeted him warmly. "Janab, your usual." Zacian smiled and nodded. As he sipped the hot tea, he noticed a young man helping an elderly lady cross the road. A small gesture, unnoticed by most, but Zacian saw it, and he smiled. Somewhere, someone else was lighting another candle. And that meant the world was still good, still worth believing in, still full of stories that began not with grand plans, but with a single act of quiet kindness. The sun rose gently over the city, casting golden light across Zacian's small balcony. Birds chirped in the distance as he watered his plants, the same way he did every morning, but today felt different. There was a quiet peace in the air, a stillness that touched his heart. It had been nearly a year since the letter arrived, the letter that changed everything. And now, as he stood with a watering can in one hand and memories in the other, Zacian realized just how far they had come, not in miles, but in meaning. Later that morning, Horace arrived with his usual energy and warmth. "Uncle," he said with a grin, "we're hosting a special event today. It's the 1-year anniversary of the Zacian Welfare Schools. Mama and I want you to come. We've planned something beautiful." Zacian smiled softly. "You always plan something beautiful." He got ready, wore his cleanest clothes, and carefully picked up the now-framed receipt from that old grocery store. He didn't carry it for pride. He carried it as a symbol, a reminder of where the story began. When they arrived at the event hall, Zacian was surprised by the size of the crowd. Children, parents, teachers, volunteers, donors, hundreds of people were gathered. Banners of the schools hung on the walls. Photos of smiling students in open classrooms decorated every corner. As the program began, Farah stood on stage first. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered. "1 year ago," she began, "a letter I wrote finally reached its destination. It reached the man who saved my life without even knowing it. Today, we celebrate not just the schools, but the kindness that started them." She stepped aside, and Harris walked up next. "We often talk about changing the world," he said, "but we forget that the world doesn't change through speeches or slogans. It changes when someone decides to care. My mother raised me with strength, but the door to that strength opened because someone chose to help, quietly, selflessly." He looked toward Zacian. "Uncle, we want to honor you today, but not with medals or certificates. We want to honor you with something greater." He signaled, and 2 children stepped onto the stage carrying a large frame. They uncovered it slowly. It was a mural hand-painted by students, showing the grocery store scene, a tired mother, a crying baby, and a man with kind eyes, reaching into his pocket. Above it were the words, "The day hope was paid forward." The audience clapped, and Zacian stood up slowly, emotion heavy in his chest. He walked to the stage as Harris met him halfway and hugged him tightly. The applause faded into silence as Zacian looked at the mural, then turned to the crowd. "I never expected this," he said gently. "All I did was help someone who needed it. I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it because it felt right." He paused, voice trembling slightly. "I've learned something this past year. The The smallest act of kindness can live longer than you do. It can grow in ways you never imagined. I look at all of you, at these children, these schools, this love, and I think, maybe we're all just stories waiting to be told. And maybe, if we're lucky, our story helps someone else write theirs. The hall was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because no words were needed. After the event, people came forward to meet Zishan. Many brought letters, hugs, and quiet thank yous. One woman whispered, "Because of your story, I forgave someone I hated for years." A teenage boy said, "I used to steal, but now I teach younger kids how to read. I want to be better, because you were better." Zayshin listened to each one, his heart growing heavier with every word, not with burden, but with the weight of love. That evening, Farah, Haris, and Zayshin sat together. At home, they didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of meaning. They had been strangers once. Now, they were a family bound by something deeper than blood. Farah looked at Zayshin and said softly, "If you hadn't helped me that day, I don't know where I would be." Zayshin shook his head. "You would have survived, Farah. You were always strong." She smiled. "But sometimes, even the strong need someone to believe in them," Haris added. "And now, because of that belief, hundreds of children believe in themselves too." Zayshin looked out the window, eyes resting on the night sky. "I used to think my life was small, that it didn't matter. But now I understand small lives can hold big meaning." The next morning, Zishan received a call from an international charity group. They wanted to document his journey and share it globally. Zishan thanked them politely but declined. "I appreciate it," he said, "but the story isn't about me. It's about what kindness can do. Tell that story instead." He spent the day as he always did, watering his plants, reading letters from students, sipping tea at the corner shop. Life hadn't made him rich, but it had made him full, and that was more than enough. One final letter came that week. It had no name, just a simple message. "I don't know you, but I heard your story. I was planning to end my life today, but then I read what you did, and I decided to wait. Maybe there's still good in the world. Maybe I'll find it too. Thank you for keeping hope alive." Zishan read it 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in the same drawer with all the others. As he closed the drawer, he whispered to himself, "Even if I never meet them, they found their way to light. That's what matters." That night, he went up to the roof and looked at the stars. The sky was clear, quiet, and deep. He thought about the people who had passed through his life, about a crying baby who became a builder of schools, about a tired mother who became a pillar of strength, about strangers who turned into family, and about a story that began in silence but ended in echoes. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he did know this. The world was still turning, still hurting, still hoping. And somewhere, someone would help a stranger, and another story would begin. Because kindness never ends. It only continues through hands, through hearts, through time, forever. Ask ChatGPT.